Welcome to another edition of Founders Tales. I'm delighted to be joined today by Jack O'Brien, who is the co-founder of Subconscious. Jack, great to have you here today. Do you want to give everybody an introduction to yourself and your company, Subconscious?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I'm Jack. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Subconscious. Our mission is to build the infrastructure for billions of tasks to efficiently solve themselves. And under the hood, what that really means is we're building highly efficient, long context agent systems. We want it to be really easy to configure, really, really effective on long context problems that either use a ton of data or run for really long periods of time, and do it in a way that's really fast and cheap. We're based on some novel research coming out of MIT, my co-founder's research, and we are really just getting going after coming out of stealth in July of last year.
Fantastic. And what was the problem that first sparked the idea for the company?
Yeah, so when my co-founder and I really originally got together, we tried to build an agent ourselves. This is March 2025. And there had been some talk about agents and the word was floating around, AI agent, AI agent. But we found the process of actually building one to be really challenging. We found the tooling to be not great. You essentially make two decisions when you're building an agent, which is what is the software framework you want to use and what is the underlying models that you want to power the agent. And we just found it really hard to get up and running using any of those frameworks. There was a big learning curve, and even then it was hard to get it to do what you wanted it to do. We also found that they were really bad on long context problems. So if you had it interact with the outside world more than 20 or 30 times, these systems would just fall apart. And then assuming you figure out the tooling, you figure out how to solve these long context problems, they're still super expensive and pretty slow. And so what we ended up doing was really looking at some of my co-founders' research and building up from scratch what we thought we wanted the agent experience to be like. Much simple to configure, really powerful on long context, and at a cost and latency that actually makes sense. And we're lucky that our really combined skills was able to build that. And that's what led us here today. I think one of the core things that we really believe is if you were working on AI research in 2016, it was a really novel thing to say, hey, I want to build an AI system that I can ask it any question and it will give me any answer. Mm-hmm. And the way people built that was piecing together a whole bunch of different specialized models with software and getting out this generalized question and answering system. And then in 2021, 2022, ChatGPT comes out and basically absorbs all of that functionality into a single model. And we're doing that now with these agent systems. So rather than piecing together a bunch of language models with software, we want to have the model absorb a lot more of that work, to do the reasoning, to use tools, to prune its own context to make sure it maintains accuracy over these really long tasks that interact with the messy real world.
Yeah, really cool stuff. So in terms of the learning curve you've gone through, what's one thing that you know now, or you thought you knew, about startups that turned out to be completely false?
Yeah, so I've done this a few times now. This is the third company I've built. I started a bed rentals company in college where we just bought a big chunk of mattresses and rented them to students and then would take them back and put them in a warehouse and rent them back. And we eventually sold that to a company that rolled up a bunch of those businesses across the East Coast. Then I built a fintech company in New York where we helped companies fundraise at the earliest stages, especially during COVID when raising remotely was becoming much more fashionable. But I think both of those really just involved a lot of grit and talking to customers and building quickly. And I think something that has just surprised me about building in the AI space is the pace is probably 10 times faster. I thought I was a great engineer. I thought I could build quickly, but now the scrappiest teams in the world and big companies can release products at lightning speed. And as fast as I thought we had to move, we have to move 2 or 3 times faster.
Building on steroids.
Yeah. Luckily, we have great steroids these days.
Cool. And is there anything else that you've learned through these three ventures that, hands-on building a company can teach you that you wouldn't necessarily pick up from a textbook or courses, etc.?
Yeah, I think a lot of books that you'll read or courses or things about starting a company usually start from a place where you already have an idea and maybe even a team, and you're building the company. And I actually think a really challenging part of this whole journey is figuring out, what to work on and who to work on with. I think to get to this idea, to get to Subconscious, was a 2-year journey of, I tried building about 10 different products. I worked with probably 8 or 9 people. And these are, not just weekend hackathon projects. These are, we're working for multiple weeks together on one or several things, and we bring in a person and then one person leaves. And I think that part of finding even the right team and the right idea to get going is so challenging. Once you've figured that out, then you can take in all the advice and really you're off to the races. But I'd say the gritty part of finding an idea that you really think is worth betting your life on is, and more than an idea, a person. I think that's the most challenging part.
Yeah, and the advice would be to be particular about, who you're going to back, and ultimately decide to kind of invest in, whether it be the people and the idea and the projects, etc.
Yeah, I think the lesson is just don't lie to yourself. Some people, start because they're, this is interesting and I came up with it, and you'll know by talking to customers or talking to other people or talking to companies that this is never going to work because you'll get crushed by incumbents, or nobody actually wants to buy your thing. And a lot of people just spend a lot of time lying to themselves and wasting time. Or the worst case, you're working with a person who is half in, half out, but maybe if they just commit, we'll have a great company together. And I think if you can work on those people, you can improve your ideas, but I think, and I've done this myself, you just have to drop ideas and people that aren't serious if you're really serious about starting something.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned clients a couple of times. So how did you convince your first customer to believe in the vision that you have for Subconscious?
Yeah, absolutely. We lead with a couple different benefits of our system. And I think the one that's most eye-catching is our ability to handle really long context problems accurately. That was how we got our first customer, and probably our next couple after that also. The benefits of our system versus using other agent systems is we're really accurate on long context, simple to configure, and really effective from a cost and latency perspective. Our ability to handle long context also means that we have better prompt adherence for longer periods of time and generally see better accuracy across exploring a lot of data. Yep. So really that capability drew in our first customers, and we were able to show versus the current systems that they were using. A lot of them were using LangChain and either Gemini or OpenAI, that we were able to outperform them on specific tasks. I'd say that's how we got our first couple of customers. And from there, there's such a large and growing market that we're competing a lot more on ease of use and going from learning about the product to actually having a working, running agent. If we can improve that process, there's a big market out there to grab. But there's this interesting just paradox where people want something that they can set up in 2 seconds, but then they also want it to be infinitely configurable. And so we give users the tools to do both.
Okay, cool. And I know you guys have got multiple engineers joining soon to scale out the founding team, which is great. So how do you personally spot startup DNA when you're talking to potential candidates?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is just, do they care? Do they really give a shit about what you're building? And the way I really gauge that is independent projects that people have worked on with no requirements to either satisfy their own curiosity or build something outside of their main working hours. I worked at Google for about 2.5 years, and I loved that experience. It was really great. But a lot of people at Google show up at 9 a.m. and leave at 5, and that is their job. And then they have great hobbies elsewhere that don't involve anything close to coding, right? It's a really awesome life. I love working there. I had great coworkers. I probably will not hire many people from Google early on in this company, though, because it is not people with startup DNA. Unless you're like me, where you went home and you worked on projects and you pushed your skills beyond what you were able to do at work, so that you could explore these other opportunities.
Yep.
And so everybody joining the team, like our first 2 engineers are people who I've met at hackathons and have done hackathon work with, and have seen firsthand that, number one, I know they're capable in their day jobs as software engineers, but number 2, they care about the problems we're solving. They want to build for developers. They have this drive to do great work. We're also bringing on a research scientist coming out of my co-founder's lab at MIT, and they've known each other for, 7 years.
Oh,
so
fantastic. When you doing these hackathons, you inadvertently tried before you buyed.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I did that looking for co-founders, and who knew I was eventually find people to work with us for much longer time.
Good, and I know you're fairly new to living in Boston, but what are your initial impressions of the startup ecosystem in Boston?
Yeah, well, I'll say I grew up in Virginia, but my dad's whole family is from Belmont. He grew up here, and my grandpa was born in Cambridge after his grandparents. So my great-grandparents came over from Ireland. So I have some deep ties into Boston, and I've always, I grew up a Patriots fan, which was a great way to grow up in the early 2000s. And I've always felt very homey here. And when I came here for business school at MIT, that's what brought me to the Boston area. It was debating with me and my wife, should we stay here? Should we move to New York? Should we go to SF? And what originally kept us here and allowed us to start Subconscious in Boston was really Hong Yin's relationship with MIT. So the number one thing that's kept us here is really talent and people.
Yeah.
We think that it's some of the most talented people in the world. It's some of the most undervalued, people in the world who live here in Boston. I think you hear a lot about San Francisco engineers and New York engineers, but a lot of them are, as we joke, classically trained in Boston and then move elsewhere. And it's already paying off for us being here, where, me and Hong Yin have built a great relationship and company here. We're pulling another person out of his lab. We've met other engineers in the Boston software ecosystem who are now joining our early team. So the number one thing I really love about Boston is just how much concentration of talent there is here. And how concentrated it is and relatively untapped it is as well. So a company like ours that's doing some interesting things related to software based on novel MIT technology. We had a ton of great applicants to join our company, and we're super excited about the early team.
Yeah. And are there any particular mentors, meetups, resources? You mentioned obviously the lab over at MIT. Hackathons, which I believe was Sunday Club, but are there any others that you'd kind of like to mention?
Yeah, I mean, those, like the Sunday Club has been really great, and I've loved working with them. I think CSAIL is chock full of super smart, undergrads, master students, and PhDs who are looking for great people to work with and great teams to join. A lot of people want to stay here and then just don't know how. And a lot of the jobs are in SF or New York. I think Matt Crane has put on some really great events to draw together the Boston ecosystem. And I probably met him in the past year, and he's introduced me to some great people and, great customers that we're now working with. There's a great investor, Will Lehman, who I've didn't actually end up being investor in Subconscious, but has invited me to all these dinners and events that he's put on and that have led to some great things for the company. And then we have some investors here in Boston that have been super helpful for us too. Mass Ventures, which is, tied to the government of Massachusetts in many ways, was our kind of core initial investor. Underscore VC, Companion VC have been really supportive here in Boston too.
Fantastic. Moving on to some reflections and maybe some advice for others. If you could send a message to yourself back in day one of entrepreneurship, what would that message be?
Yeah, I guess I'll pull that as day one of this company,
Okay.
as opposed to the very, very beginning. I guess the really simple one would be, turn off all of your social media. It's so simple, but there is so much happening in AI every day that it's really easy to get FOMO and want to change what you're doing. And I think there's some amount of it is necessary to keep a pulse on what's happening in the world. I also think the line between that being useful time spent and just reading about tech gossip essentially is pretty thin, and you can easily lose valuable time that you could be reaching out to customers, talking to customers, building the product, or in the worst case, changing your product roadmap because of a week-long fad. I just think stick to your guns on what you're building, have a pulse on what customers want, have a pulse on what you're building, and turn off social media.
Yeah, that's great advice. I've not had someone share that with myself before, but as you said, if you are particularly building in the AI space, then I can see how you're going to get pulled in different directions if you were trying to stay across everything.
Yeah, there's just so much crap all day. And some of it's really good and some of it's really interesting. Is what's happening with Claude now Moltbot, now Moltfoot, now OpenClaw. And all of that is somewhat relevant to what we're doing, and I think there's important lessons to learn. But if you spend more than a half hour reading about it, you're just fueling your consumption of tech gossip, I think, more than actually learning.
Going down an AI rabbit hole, basically. Okay. And over the years, what was the best advice you've received from somebody else, maybe another founder, investor, etc.?
Yeah, I have a good mentor of mine who gave me this advice, I think when I was thinking about leaving Google to start the fintech company. I think about all the time, where he basically said, there's really two things that you're conflating here, and one is risk and one is fear. And I think all the time about what's the difference between risk and fear. Risk is something that you have to calculate and understand at any step. Should I jump and start this company when I see the opportunity right here? Should we work with this one particular customer and put a lot of our engineering effort into working them versus doing some other things we had on the roadmap? And it's easy to get kind of emotional about those decisions. Oh, if I jump and do this company, what if it fails? Everyone's going to think I'm a failure. What if we work with this one customer and they totally screw us? But I really want to do it if I'm scared of it working or not. And I think you just have to take fear out of the equation in a lot of those, and realize, number one, when you actually calculate risk of jumping and starting a company and putting your whole self into it, and knowing that your minimum outcome is actually pretty high, there's pretty low risk to doing it. When you're working with a big customer and you really see that there's some probability of it working out and changing the whole company, if you drop fear and just really calculate risk, I find it's much easier to make these decisions, whether that be big life decisions or smaller companies.
Yeah, absolutely applicable across all parts of life. Love that. And then one final question for you, Jack. How do you personally stay sane when it comes to dealing with the inevitable highs and lows of building out a startup?
It's definitely a roller coaster. It's a lot of no's. It's a lot of things that don't really work. And then it's a couple moments of, we are the greatest. I can't believe we actually have broken through some of these walls. When we have the highs, it's easy. When we have the lows, I think, there's really nothing I'd rather be doing than driving this company forward. Number one, I think it's one of the greatest times in history that matches up with what we're building, to build something that's really meaningful and going to impact the world for, decades to come. And number two, I just think back to my time at big tech and think about how I had, everything that I thought I had wanted. Google was really my dream job for a long time.
Okay.
And knew that I wanted a lot more. I wanted to be able to drive my own work forward. I wanted to be able to really make a dent in the world. And so when the lows happen, I think, I least I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah, good perspective. So fantastic. Thank you so much for joining today, Jack. Loved hearing your insights and learning a lot more about Subconscious. Sounds like you guys have got a fantastic mission, and I really look forward to kind of seeing you guys continue to grow and go from strength to strength.